Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to go over all of the books that I read in September. It wasn't actually my best reading month. I mean, I did really like a lot of the books that I read, but compared to the amount that I normally read in other months, I would say that I definitely did read a little bit less. In total, I read 7 books, and I will say a lot of them were actually really good books, so I'm not too upset about having a lower number this month. I did go on vacation, my long distance boyfriend did visit, and I also took a really important test. I will say I did read a good amount of variety. I read a YA mystery, I read some sci-fi, I read some fantasy, and I did read some romances. So let's just get straight into it. I'm just gonna go in the order that I have them written down. I don't have a lot of the physical copies with me, unfortunately, just because I am kind of living in 2 different places. I am living at my school apartment right now, but obviously a lot of the books that I've already read, I just keep at home just because it makes it a little easier than carrying books back and forth. So one of the books that I started off this month with was Red Rising, and that's kind of been a series that I think I keep kind of talking about on this channel. So sorry if you watched any of my other videos, this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I absolutely love this series, so I'm going to keep talking about it. So anyways, Red Rising is the start of a trilogy, although there have technically been more books added. I think there's going to be a total of 7, I'm not totally sure. So that obviously isn't quite a trilogy, but it originally starts off as a trilogy, and I have now since finished the 3rd book, and I do think that if you wanted to stop there, you definitely could, although I personally, since I love this series so much, will definitely be continuing. Anyways, so Red Rising is about our main character, Darrow. He goes through something really major in the very beginning of this book that kind of sets him on this path to save his world, essentially. He is a red, which is the lowest caste in this society. So he's basically a hell diver, which is somebody who mines for the specific helium isotope that is allowing for life on Mars, which is where he's living. And I will say, a lot of people I know are scared of sci-fi. I personally was a little bit scared of sci-fi, even as someone who studies science for my major. But I will say that especially the first book, it's not really too scientific term heavy, and I will say it really does feel more like a general fantasy book. So if you're a fantasy reader, I would still definitely recommend giving this a shot. I will say, like I've said before about the series, there is very little romance, so don't go into this series looking for that or expecting it. There is little bits and parts, but I will say when you get to those parts, it's really rewarding, and you just want to hold on to those little moments because, like I said, they're very few and far between. After that, I did read Golden Sun, which is the 2nd book in the trilogy. I started Morning Sun during September, but I technically finished it in October, so you guys will see that in my next month's wrap up. Golden Sun picks up, if I can remember correctly, picks up pretty immediately after the ending of Red Rising, and again, you're following the same character and all of the found family that you meet along the way, which for me, I didn't really expect that would be a thing going into it, but I really liked it and really appreciated all the bonds between the characters, which is great until you do lose some of them, and I don't necessarily think that's too much of a spoiler because it's just kind of a little heads up if you don't want any traumatic events to go on. That's not really what you're gonna get from this book. It does on the back compare it to Game of Thrones and Hunger Games, which I think is pretty accurate. You do go through a lot of war and battle scenes, which I personally think Pierce Brown wrote really well. And I will say, even though the first book isn't super sci-fi heavy, you do get a lot more into that in the 2nd book. But again, it's not necessarily in a way that's hard to understand. It's more so just that a lot more of the scenes are taking place in space. You're using spaceships, kind of things like that, more so setting related than necessarily oh, you need to know all what these specific words really mean, if that makes sense. And yeah, so I cannot talk enough about this series. I just think you guys have to go into it kind of blindly. That's what I did, and I got absolutely blown away. There's something that happens pretty early on in Red Rising that I was not expecting at all, and that completely blew my mind and is kind of the thing that sets everything else into action. And yeah, again, please read it. I think it's a little bit hard for me to rate it when I have such a high esteem for this entire series, but I do think I'm giving the first 2 books in that both 5 stars. Okay, and then I actually think I read this next book before those, but it's going to be The Inheritance Games. I gave that a 4 star. I did really like it. I think it was my first YA mystery. I'm not completely sure, but I don't really tend to go towards mysteries or just the YA. I mean, I do like YA, but I think I tend to generally lean towards adult books a little bit more. But But I will say I really did like it. It was a lot of fun. I think I said this in my reading vlog, the 24-hour reading vlog, what I actually read this book in. It really feels like you're in an escape room where you're having to figure out all these clues. I mean, I think a lot of people already know about this book, so this might be a little bit repetitive with what I'm saying. There are a ton of really short chapters which make this book super easy to get through. It's very fast paced, again, kind of sort of due to those short chapters. I personally really liked the way it ended. I didn't guess the ending at all, even though I kind of thought that I did, which I'm really glad I didn't, because sometimes that really can kill a book for me when, you know, there's all this buildup and then you guess it. But luckily I didn't. And then I really like how the love triangle was ended in this first book. I don't personally know, you know, if it's going to be developed further with one of the brothers or anything like that, because just the way she ended it off was definitely still like satisfying, but kept me wanting to, you know, continue the series and find out what happens next, which I really like. And yeah, I don't think it's my favorite book of all time. I did obviously have a good time, which is why I rated it 4 stars, but I don't know. Some things about the YA-ness kind of bothered me. I know I mentioned this before. The best friend just kind of, you don't need a fake cuss, instead just completely take all that out, but she's using a lot of like annoying little terms to pretend cuss because her parents, I guess, check her phone or things like that, and I don't know, it kind of bugged me a little bit, but it's also not really the biggest deal in the grand scheme of things, and I definitely want to continue the series and then also read the other book series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, the Natural series, because I have been seeing that absolutely everywhere. And yeah, I definitely think I might enjoy the Criminal Minds type of plot more than just the crazy house and all that, but I did still definitely enjoy this book. And then the last book that I read in my 24-hour reading vlog was Call Me By Your Name, and I think I gave that about a 3 star. I definitely think the writing was super pretty. It was very lyrical, very well written, but I don't know if it was maybe just reading it after such fast-paced book that having to read, I mean, I can't remember exactly how long the chapters were, but I mean 50 to 100 page chapters where you don't really get that little break. It was a little bit much for me. I don't think I personally related to the characters' inner thoughts very much. It was very atmospheric. I absolutely loved how the writer, like, I can't remember what his name is. I really liked how he built up this world. Obviously it is set in Italy, so you already kind of have an idea of what Italy looks like if you've ever seen pictures, which I'm sure most of us have. But I don't know, something about it just felt very nostalgic, and I think it was perfect to read kind of during summer or the end of summer. Yeah, again, I don't think I personally related that much to the character, which is why I gave it a slightly lower rating. Some of the scenes just kind of gave me the ick, and I feel like if those were left out, I probably would have liked it a little bit more. And I have heard that those more creepy things that the author has the main character thinking are left out of the actual movie, so I might try to watch that at some point. I know somebody commented on that video and saying they absolutely liked the movie a lot. If I get the time, I definitely will, because again, like I said, the atmosphere of it was just absolutely perfect, and I did really like the relationship between the two characters. But again, I don't think I said this, it is only one person's POV and you don't get the other guy's POV, and I don't know, I think it would have been nice to see a little bit. And yeah, definitely not my favorite book, but also still a pretty good one. Okay, and then so next I did go on vacation for a week. I started off reading Morningstar, which is the 3rd book in the Red Rising trilogy, and I didn't finish that, but I did read most of it during September. I'm not counting that towards the total for this month, but also on vacation, I read Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young, and that book was so freaking cute. I absolutely loved it. I think I gave it a 4.75, which for me is really good for a romance, especially a standalone, or at least the first in interconnected standalones, I think it might be. Basically, it's a romance between Bo and Win. They both have some sort of like limb difference, which is obviously where the title comes from, and they meet at a Halloween party, which is why I actually added it in my fall book recommendations. I think it would be perfect to read during this month, although I don't think it's really necessary. You could definitely read it at any time of the year. It is an accidental pregnancy trope, which I think a lot of us tend to shy away from, just because you don't really necessarily want them to be together because they're having a baby. But I do think this book did a really good job of them having an initial chemistry and banter, and also just kind of understanding of each other, and then having that even grow even more as they, you know, spend so much much time together because they're planning on having this baby. There's a little bit of a found family in it, which was also really nice to see. The main girl character, Win, has really supportive friends, and it's kind of got like a cute little friend group in it. And yeah, I absolutely love that book. Super, super cute. Definitely really good if you want a rom-com. I will say to check the trigger warnings, honestly, just for any book before you go into it. There is something that could potentially be a little bit triggering to people that I think you should look up if you're worried about. Okay, and then next, I actually read Divine Rivals, which this book has been absolutely super, super hyped up, and I really did like it, but I don't know if the hype kind of threw me off a little bit. I can't remember what I rated it, probably like a 4.25, because if you don't know, so the plot is between Roman and Iris's brother is currently fighting in this war, and in general, like, a lot of this story is based off this war that's happening between a god and a goddess. The lore behind it honestly isn't really that big of a part of it. I didn't really personally understand it too much, but you don't really need to. Anyways, so like I said, Iris's brother is at war, and she has this typewriter since she's a writer at a newspaper, and she constantly writes him letters, and she puts them under her wardrobe, and for some reason they disappear. So she just assumes or hopes that they're getting, sent to him, because I will say some of the like buildings or just objects in this world are magical. She doesn't know that they're actually being sent to this guy named Roman, and they actually work at the same newspaper and they're fighting for the same spot. So you kind of get a little bit of academic rivals, even though it's not necessarily in an academic setting. Because they're both writers, they do send these letters back and forth, and of course the writing in those letters are absolutely phenomenal, honestly. Super well written, just super heartfelt and romantic and very, very cute, and I think that for me is what made this story so much better. But not that I necessarily disliked the setting of it being a war, but it just felt super, super World War I, super World War II, which I've actually heard kind of as a criticism of this book, where it doesn't really feel more like a fantasy than it does maybe a historical romance. And I mean, that kind of threw me off too. I really did expect a touch more fantasy in this book, and you don't necessarily get that. It's more just that they have these magical items and places, not necessarily, where other fantasy books have a lot that you can't really understand or you have to, world build. That wasn't really a part of this book, but I still definitely did really like it, and I definitely see where the hype came from. Okay, and then the last book that I read during this month was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, because I was seeing that everywhere on bookstagram. So many people were calling it like a 6-star read or infinity stars, which really just kind of, piqued my interest. I had never read Ashley Poston's other book, The Dead Romantics, which I'm actually currently reading right now. Her writing in that is just, I don't know what it was, but I just felt so connected to the characters and the story, and even just a couple pages in, I was immediately hooked. I think I binged that book pretty quickly, which for me, not that that necessarily makes a book good, but I think sometimes that makes the reading experience a little bit more enjoyable. And basically you have your main character Clementine and your main guy character, I don't know if it's Iwin or Ivan, because I know sometimes W's can be pronounced with a V. I'm not totally sure. But anyways, so she is a publicist at this publishing company, and he is a chef, but the whole 7-year slip aspect of it is a little bit confusing before you read the book, but I think Ashley Poston does a really good job of making it super clear when you're actually reading it. Anyways, I'm not going to go too much into that because I feel like I can't explain it as well as she can write it. You know what I mean? If you're really interested in this book, I would definitely just say put it at the top of your TBR. Honestly, it's definitely worth it, and I think most people that I've seen have absolutely loved it. I don't think I've actually seen even one bad review of it, although I'm sure, it's out there somewhere. And yeah, so I think that's really about it for this video. I definitely, like I said, didn't have as big of a reading month as I normally do, but honestly, that's life, that's how it goes, and I'm not really too upset about it. I definitely enjoyed a lot, and honestly, I had really high ratings throughout this whole month with the books that I read, so I'm sure you've heard other people say it before. It's more about how much you enjoy the books you read than how many you read. And I will say too, I don't mean to make anybody feel bad with me saying 7 books is a bad reading month for me, because I know not everyone has the privilege of being able to read that much. I mean, everyone has different responsibilities and things that they have to do during their day. So never compare yourself to how much other people are reading. I don't have a job besides school, and so I did have most of this month actually off. Even with that, I didn't read as much as I normally do. So, you know, I keep yapping, but that'll be it from me. I hope you guys all like this video. Maybe either got some book recommendations or just got to hear some things about one of your favorite books. Again, let me know if you plan on reading or have read any of these books and what your thoughts were. And yeah, I will see you guys all in the next one. This is